Hi, I'm Dr. Chris Bruton, a mental health therapist, and welcome to the Bruton Performance Lab. In my journey as a mental health therapist, kind of got off to a weird start when I was in my bachelor's degree and honestly couldn't figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. So kind of forced by my advisor to pick a major or I wouldn't be able to register for classes 48 hours later. I chose mathematics, and that threw me into the world of mathematics, which is about the furthest thing you can be from mental health psychology. But it started this journey of putting me around students teaching math and then coaching wrestling, which was a passion of mine. And so I just had this hybrid of kind of having this analytical understanding of the math and formulaic ways in which things work, but also loving people and trying to motivate people and trying to help people. And as I decided, well, the math is kind of getting in the way of me helping people, I decided to get my PhD and start my own private practice. And from there, I very quickly understood that so many people dealt with trauma, and I kept bumping into trauma with all the work that I was doing with my clients. And so I really became obsessed with what is trauma and how the heck do I help people who are struggling with trauma? So before we even talk about how my coaching and my love of working with athletes and working with people who are just high performers and a bunch of different industries, how trauma and performance issues in those fields are correlated, I feel very compelled for all the people that I've helped with PTSD and trauma to say that I'm not saying that performance issues are traumatic in the way that somebody with PTSD would experience that. By definition, PTSD states that it's a person who is having these triggers, these reoccurring physical triggers, panic attacks, stress, depressed moods, based off of a life-threatening event that they experienced or observing the life-threatening event of someone else. And so because this is truly life-threatening stuff, there's a heaviness that comes with the PTSD work that I've done for the past decade that is much different than how I'm shifting into helping people who have performance. The correlation really comes down to the biology of what's going on, but feel very compelled to say that they are not one and the same, just out of respect to the people who have experienced the terrible life-threatening things that they've experienced. With that being said, though, trauma is being triggered by a past event and it affecting me in the here and now, oftentimes going as far as a disassociation back to that past event, whatever that was, forgetting that you're in the here and now and your senses being completely engulfed in that moment that happened back then. But the physical ramifications, the way in which our brain and our body respond to those events, quite frankly, is the same way that so many people that I've been helping with performance are talking about their symptoms. With a person who is having the yips, for example. And I know we're not supposed to use the word yips, but this is a safe space, and so we're going to call it the yips. For a person who's having the yips, they talk about how their body just kind of hacks itself at the point of needing to perform whatever that physical motion or that performance thing is, and that hack in their biology, which all of a sudden takes over where they no longer have control over their muscle memory and the thing that they've done successfully 1,000 times. Well, that's a lot in the way and sounds very similar to the person who has PTSD and who is operating in a calm demeanor and their body is operating in a way that they're able to connect with the here and now and connect with people. And yet in a nanosecond, their sympathetic nervous system hijacks that and puts them into that panic state. They can even tell themselves in the moment, what happened back then is not happening yet now, and yet that panic state exists within them. And so it wasn't until I spent all this time working with trauma and PTSD and really having a lot of success helping people overcome and desensitize and reprocess all the negative cognitions around the event that happened that gave them the symptoms of PTSD or trauma, where I was able to make this correlation. So with the stereotypical case of a veteran coming back from overseas, the triggers, the flashbacks, the things that happen for them, something as simple as 4th of July fireworks with their kids can put them into a panic attack episode. case after case of helping individuals like that, or helping abuse victims, or helping victims of other similar life-threatening events, and learning how the specific therapies that I was implementing was actually helping create neural networks in the brain, and where these new neural networks would no longer activate their fight or flight response. And the triggers that they were experiencing in the past were now desensitized to that, and they were able to stay in a parasympathetic, calm state, where in the past they would have been completely triggered by that event. Learning about that, helping people with that, helping them understand their own thoughts and how it's connected to their biology has really led to a lot of really interesting and really cool success stories with people who are in high performing, very critical, not life or death, but certainly life bringing or life altering performance events, and how helping them desensitized to that stress of that performance that they have to achieve, helping them be able to be in those moments and be able to respond without the sympathetic nervous system getting involved, has really led to them catching the ability to enter their flow state easier. It's so much nicer to be able to have to perform this physical activity or this mental activity that has this high level of performance requirement without your nervous system hacking you and getting in the way. So again, as not to say that this is PTSD or performance PTSD, or even a phrase that I've been playing around with, which is called just performance trauma. It is a new way in which sports psychologists are trying to help people, not just with the mental game, but with the mental/biological game when it comes to the way our nervous systems interact with our thoughts. We learn from Polyvagal theory about this concept of window of tolerance, right? So let's say that if we have a level 0, which means that we're as calm as we possibly can be, and a level 10, which means we are having the highest level of disturbance biologically, mentally, and emotionally that we could possibly experience. There's this window of tolerance where we can kind of stay in our calm state. For some people, that's a level 1 or a level 2. For other people, they might be able to stay in that calm space at a level 3 or level 4. But at some point, every human being kind of leaves that window of tolerance when they get to a level that sends their sympathetic nervous system into fight or flight mode. And all of a sudden, all the things that associate with our fight or flight mode, our inability to think as logically as we would normally think, or our ability to hear the human voice and process what that human voice is saying, or even our ability to have empathy for another person. Like, all of that gets hijacked because our survival instinct kicks into gear. And those things are very, very much not needed for our survival. So a common example that I use with a lot of my clients: if you're going on a hike and you're walking through nature and it's a beautiful sunny day, it's 70 degrees, you're in the shade, it's perfect, the woods are quiet, you're making great time, you have a great pace, it's just the perfect hike, the perfect day. Your nervous system, your parasympathetic nervous system is engaged. You're able to soak in the peace of that moment. Logical thinking is just flowing from you. You're able to connect with nature. If you're walking with somebody, you're able to have a really good connecting conversation with that person. But if all of a sudden a bear burst through the bushes and started running at you, in a nanosecond, your parasympathetic nervous system would go offline. Your amygdala would sense that threat. And before you could even say the word bear or say the word run, your amygdala has taken over. You've received a shot of adrenaline. Your parasympathetic nervous system has taken over. Your heart rate has increased. Your breathing has increased because you need oxygenated blood to run from that bear or fight for that bear. And we're going to excuse the fact that, like, we know we're not supposed to run from the bear. And yet, when your sympathetic nervous system is engaged and your logical thinking isn't as readily available, people run. It's what we do when there's a threat, even if logically that's not what we're supposed to do. We run because there's a threat. As soon as that bear busts through the woods, I go into fight or flight mode, and I basically have a choice. I'm either going to fight that bear and defeat it and either kill it or get it to run away, or I'm going to run and get as far away from that bear as I can. We also have a freeze response that kicks into gear because it's a survival instinct. When fight or flight isn't really possible, or fight or flight isn't work, we do have a freeze response. We even have a fawn response, which I'm not going to get into right now. But basically, it's this fight or flight response that the vast majority of us who are in high-performing, very performance-critical industries have, is this fight or flight response when that anxiety creeps up. So we have to deal with that. If the bear's chasing me, if the bear's after me, I'm not going to be able to think logically. I'm not going to be able to have a great conversation with the person that I'm hiking with anymore. I'm not going to be able to have empathy for them. Like, let's be honest, every zombie movie you've ever watched, who's the first person to die? The person who helps the other person, right? Like, empathy will get you killed, or at least that's what our nervous system tells us in those moments. And so all these things that we commonly need for just to be able to have peace, balance, connection, teamwork, camaraderie in our life, when our fight or flight gets kicked into gear, those things are completely hijacked, and we don't have access to that as much as we normally do. So when it comes to this, and we are put in this position where we have this high performance that we have to complete, our nervous system, when it senses that fear, not a bear, but the fear of failure, or the fear of not being good enough, or the fear of being an imposter, that, man, as soon as everybody figures out that I'm here and I'm not supposed to be and I'm nowhere on their level, they're going to kick me out of here. They're going to reject me. Like, when we sense that fear, that same reaction happens in us. That same fight or flight response kicks into gear. And we are not able to perform optimally when that's going on. Now, sports psychology and mental health therapy in general has used talk therapy for the most part to try to help people overcome these issues. But talk therapy can only go so far, specifically when there is something traumatic involved with that. It really does a lot around trying to help the mind and the heart make associations and find healing and find balance. But the biology behind that, the sympathetic nervous system's response to that, the way that our neural networks are connected in our brain around that, like, those things are kind of left to just respond accordingly. So Francine Shapiro, who I don't know if you would say discovered or created eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, or as we call it, EMDR, she would say that there are neural networks that are created when trauma happens. I would say that there are neural networks created when we experience performance failure in this very highly critical performance situation. You know, your brain is made up of these very special cells, very specific cells called neurons, and the only place in the entire body they are found is in the brain. And so when we experience a negative event, if we experience a traumatic event, a series of neurons fire that create this network around that experience. And PTSD, when that experience is life-threatening, that neural network is created. It's almost kind of like downloaded in a way. It's saved so that we can recall it very quickly later, so that if anything comes along that triggers us the way that that traumatic event triggered us, we have already have this downloaded neural network nervous system response that's going to kick into gear as fast as possible, that's going to keep us safe if that trigger happens again. That's really good if we are going to experience this life-threatening thing over and over. Our nervous system is going to keep us safe. We're going to survive. But when it's triggers and when it's things that shouldn't be triggering us and when it's events that aren't life-threatening, that nervous system reaction gets very, very invasive to our happiness, our peace, our relationships, and in performance, our ability to perform to our highest ability. So if we just do talk therapy, and we are just trying to attack the mind and the heart around our performance, we really leave out this biological element that is happening oftentimes when this is done well, but oftentimes misses the mark because our nervous system continues to have that same neural network activated. every time we have talk therapy, every time the talk therapy triggers that same thing, every time sports psychology goes back to that same performance concern, the neural network is activated, the nervous system's activated, and we're not doing a whole lot to actually have that biological change. So where the therapy that I do, specifically doing this therapy with people with PTSD and now doing this with people who have performance issues, we're actually trying to create new neural networks around the performance issues that a person experienced. So again, going back to a person with the yips, everything in their muscle memory says, this is what I've done 1,000 times. And when I release this ball, or when I swing this club, or when I perform this task, I have this mental and muscle memory that I can call on, and I can stay in a flow state with that. But the Yips says, well, at the point of release, at the point where I no longer have control over this thing, this movement, this outcome, in a nanosecond, my nervous system and my sympathetic nervous system kicks into gear. And it hacks my biology. And my biology and the synapses for my brain can travel faster through my nervous system than I can release the ball or swing that club. And my muscle memory's hacked, and I cannot complete that task the way that I used to anymore. And the more that I try to do that, and the more that I try to overcome that, oftentimes the more ingrained this neural network of failure gets ingrained.